Joining me now to break down the budget is political analyst Karim Boulos. Thank you so much for joining us, Karim.
Thank you.
As this is Mayor Plante's final budget, how would you characterize it?
Well, she followed through on her promises. When she came in 8 years ago, she wanted to focus on future trending needs of the city. So anything to do with the environment, things to do with housing, transit, accessibility in general for people living in the city or on the island of Montreal. And so she's following through on it. Now, those promises were criticized at the time that she made them as being very costly. And now we're seeing a budget of $7.2 billion for a population that's just under 2 million people for Montreal and the greater Montreal region of about 3.5 million. And so it's a big budget, it's a big number, but she did come through. She did say, I was going to focus on public transit. She put money into it. I'm going to put money into housing, and she put money into it. And environmental measures to change the way roads are configured, to create her famous sponge roads, to spend money on water purification, which is something you need. If you're going to have more housing, you're going to need more infrastructure and sewers and water. So she is following through on those promises, and some of the things she's spending money on are not that glamorous, but are necessary.
What do you think of the city's decision to impose a hiring freeze and potentially have savings there?
Well, they speak a little bit out of both sides of their mouth in the sense that they want to create a team that will facilitate and accelerate the permitting process so that more housing can be built more quickly as per provincial and federal, push or pressure. So that's great. But if you're putting a hiring freeze in, where are those employees going to come from? And how are you going to redistribute the resources when we see that the biggest chunk of the entire budget is public security? So they're trying to ramp up the number of police officers because there has been a bit of a resurgence in all cities with regards to violence and so on. After COVID, we've seen a spike. So I think that she's putting the money in the right place, but then how do you do that with the hiring freeze?
What does this budget say to Montrealers?
Well, I mean, at some point, 60-70% of the budget is made up of taxes, and with taxes being maintained at just under 2% across the board, Montreal needs to find a way to diversify its sources of income. We've got to find new ways to attract new money into the city and new investments that don't come from Ottawa or Quebec or the taxpayers' pockets in the form of taxes.
In a few words, what does this budget leave for the next mayor?
In November 2025, we're going to have a new mayor, possibly a new administration if Projet Montréal doesn't get in. And so they have to manage this $7.2 billion with the priorities of the last 8 years administrations. So the new mayor is going to come in, with their hands somewhat tied up for the next at least 3 years before they can bring about their changes. So if Projet Montréal comes in, well, the new mayor is going to have to follow Madame Plante's trend. If a new mayor with a new party comes in, we're likely to see some costly changes to the orientation of the city and refocusing some of the money that's currently allocated to the Projet Montréal initiatives.
Thank you so much for joining us, Karim.
It's my pleasure.